Good afternoon, Boston Buddies. Welcome to Brunch with Boston Buddies. Today, we have a loaded panel here. We have Boston, Billy Rodgers, four-time Boston Marathon winner and four-time New York City Marathon winner as well as a lot of other marathons. Welcome, Bill. How are you?
I'm good, Vince. I'm good to be joining you and the team here and saying hello to the Boston Buddies group and talk about running and what it means and the power of this sport.
Great, thank you. And we also have Natalie Dorsett, who is our second step representative from last year. How are you, Natalie?
Very well, thanks, Vince. How are you doing? Hi, Boston Buddies.
And then we have Ian Eckersley coming back for a second time, lending a helping hand and adding a little bit of professionalism to this interviewing stuff that I'm trying to do. How are you, Ian?
Yeah, good morning from Brisbane. Great to be back again, and what a thrill to be talking to the man who's been at the epicenter of the evolution of running for 50 or 60 years, Bill Rodgers. How you doing, Bill?
I'm doing good, Ian. Good to be talking with you again. We should let Natalie and Vince know that I've been to Australia and my experiences there, but maybe we'll go over that a bit later.
You ran the famous Melbourne Marathon in 1982, so we'll talk about that a bit later. But how are you doing through this pandemic, Bill? How are you doing through isolation? Because you've had this routine of 50 years or so, running at events, attending events, motivating, inspiring runners, and that whole routine of 50 years has been upended. You must be feeling a bit lost.
Yeah, I think everyone is. Today I was out on a run near my home and, running on the roads and the trails, seeing more people out there than before, I try to be careful and wear a mask or social distance. But I bumped into one of my old buddies from the Greater Boston Track Club, and he was out on the course and he wasn't wearing a mask. So wait a second, and so, but it does, I feel kind of like untethered, like the earth's moving under our feet and we're like, what is happening? And I think I think if you're a runner or a walker, a cyclist, someone who can get outside, and move. There's something, I guess being a longtime runner, it's easier for me. I think for the newer runners, it's a great experience to try to find their way in the sport and maybe run with a friend, a social distance friend. I might be trying one of those events in the near future. But yeah, it's just a nerve-wracking time and it's just tough on everyone. And so I think the more that everyone can work together, in the US and anywhere in the world, since this disease is global. But it's just, you're right. I've always been a racer, and since I was 15 years old, I was someone who always aimed for races, except for 1 year when I became an ex-runner. Back after my Wesleyan days, Natalie, way back, and just kind of crazy because I always loved running. I still love it, just as much. And we all do, but you have to kind of, I think you have to take strength, I think, from your friends and family and your past a little bit and know what you are aiming for down the road, because this is going to end. It will, but I think we just got to stick together. We got to work at it. We got to push, just like we do with our training,
Yep, I 100% agree there. Yeah, we will get through this. We don't have a choice. We will run again.
So tricky.
Well, I guess that's the thing, Bill. Runners around the world are sort of socially isolated. They're maybe not physically isolated, depending where you live. You're still able to get out. But I was thinking the other day, with runners going into a form of hibernation from each other from races,
yeah,
you think this period of global isolation could totally reshape the sport of running around the world? And I guess I'm talking on two levels. For the elite end, guys who were great this year, last year, or something like that, they might not come back and be the same runners that they were. They could get injured or they could just lose their edge. New runners, male and female, will come out of the woodwork that we haven't heard before. They've been training their butts off. And the sport of mass participation events, that could be reshaped too. What do you think?
Yeah, of course I agree. We all saw that the Olympic Games, the world's biggest sporting event, maybe alongside the World Cup of soccer, international sports are so huge, and running is a big part of that today. And so it was just sad to see the Olympic Games postponed. Just kind of a very tough thing to see happen. But number one is the health of everybody, all of our health. Our health is number one. That's partly why we are out there. Why we go out the door for a run or a walk. A ride on a bike, something like that. And so I totally understand it. You got to do what you got to do. And that is the name of the game. All the athletes, professional athletes, all know that. I mean, they have coaches, they have advisors, agents. They know training so well, But still, for some of them, it could be, the end of their career as an athlete. And when you're taking it so serious, it's a very dicey thing. It's a very dicey thing. But I also think it's dicey for everybody right now. If you're a new runner, I don't know what I would do, if I was a 15-year-old high school runner, like when I began running and I couldn't get out with my brother Charlie and run with our best friend like I did way back. It's going to be cross country this year in the United States or around the world, and so it's a very tricky question, but we know that this is going to end. Countries around the world have been fighting the fight for a long time. We've made a lot of progress. We're making progress in the U.S. So this is the way what we got to do. We got to be tough. We really got to be tough and beat this. It's just like training. That's the analogy that I made. And to stick with it. Let's just stick with it. Let's help each other. You help your teammates. That's how I was, Natalie, when I was at Wesleyan. I got a lot of help when I was there. A young athlete, from my teammates and all that,
Right.
So,
you wouldn't have done your first half without being dragged there, right, by Amby?
Absolutely. Amby Burfoot, who recruited me about, have you heard of Wesleyan? It was only like 18 miles away from my house. I said, yeah, I think so. and it was just a great experience, being at Wesleyan. It was a little intimidating for me,
Mm-hmm.
but I think, when one of the cool things about the sport is you make friends. This is the ultimate, you make friends in the sport. I mean, Ian and I got to meet each other, and over the years, and it's a global sport. There's so much impact. And we're seeing that now more and more through this kind of technology with social media, doing events like this, and how can this sport grow even more? I mean, that's one thing that I think is going to be looked at down the road. But I'm glad still to be a part of it. And thank you, Amby.
Yeah, Amby actually joined us in a virtual event today. Our group is doing a 5K tournament of champions where 128 runners from all over the globe are running up against each other head to head. And Amby Burfoot went up against the legendary Gene Dykes. So that was a huge battle between the two of them.
I think Amy's going to lose that on the day. On the other hand, I think his career is a very high level,
Right.
long-lasting career. So Amby will have the edge in that territory. And but I think it's great fun. I mean, this is the kind of fun that I'm talking about, that we runners are good at creating. And the cool thing, Natalie, you're here, and I talked with Ian last week about this. When I was at Wesleyan, there wasn't a women's cross country or track team.
Right.
There weren't many women there. A few were coming in when I was a senior, So Wesleyan was a different school a little bit. It's an old college and everything, but of course our sport is one of those sports where men and women take part on equal terms. And the real truth is not many sports do that. So we're seeing that this is continuing today, as an issue. But Wesleyan was a great college. It's still a great college, and I still follow the teams there. I follow the cross country and track teams. I support them wholeheartedly.
Bill, you were not long out of Wesleyan, and I want to take you back to a story in your book, Marathon Man, which came out a couple of years ago, with events of what was a pretty memorable year for you, 1979, where you beat Japan's Toshihiko Seiko in a fierce duel to win your third Boston Marathon. You were then invited to the White House. You went one better than our friend Jack Fultz, who spoke about running at the White House with Bill Clinton, but you got a state dinner with President Jimmy Carter in 1979, and that was one of the most honoured, interesting, but nerve-wracking days of your life, wasn't it? Tell us about the journey there. And you had a bit of a detour on the way there, didn't you, in the limousine?
Yeah.
You stopped for something.
I think I was with Joan Benoit Samuelson, who won the women's division, 79 at Boston, you know. She's a college senior. Bowdoin comes out and cranks out. And then we got to see this new budding star. And we didn't know what's going to happen down the road. But I'm a big fan of fireworks. And if you go away south of Massachusetts, you could get some fireworks, buy fireworks. And because my dad was a big fan of fireworks, and I grew up the same way, you know. And so we bought some fireworks, and we had them we were in like a limo or a chauffeured car. You know, you can't just drive up to the White House in your own car. You know, you gotta have the special invite and the pass. I was so nervous, but Joan and I, we calmed each other down. I knew Joan a little bit, you know, from her high school days and all that. I knew who she was, you know, and we became good friends that way. But it was wonderful meeting President Carter and his wife Rosalind, and the Prime Minister of Japan, Prime Minister Ohiro, I think his name was, and just interesting because the U.S. and Japan have such interesting histories and also running wise. You know, there's always been there's a rivalry. We're pretty even, I think, as athletes.
But Jimmy Carter was a cross-country runner at college, so you and he definitely had something in common. He asked for you for a bit of advice, didn't he? And you just chatted about running.
Yeah, he asked me, you know, do you breathe through your mouth or your nose when you run? I was like, okay. He's the president of the United States, you know. I mean, we got to be I liked him a lot. He's very down to earth, you know. And Rosalind was talking with Joan about the environmental issues, because Joan has always been interested in nature, the environment, you know. And I knew that President Carter was a nuclear engineer or something. My dad was an engineer. He was a smart guy. And so we had something to talk about. And I think I didn't know that maybe I knew that he was running a bit, you know.
Growing up, you had a few different nicknames. Growing up with your brother Charlie, you've got this wonderful relationship, you and Charlie, and you had a childhood friend, Jason Keogh. You guys were like the three amigos. But we all know you as Bill, but you've had many different names over the years, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. When I was a kid, you know, I did a little column in the local paper, and my nickname was Reg. And then I got a little older, and it became Ezra. You know, I don't know how I got that name, but I think it was when I became a runner. You know, when you become a runner, we all had nicknames, you know, and so I think that's part of the routine. It's that friendship thing, you know. It doesn't matter if you're Amby Burfing, you just won the gold medal at the Boston Marathon, you know. He was Amby to us, you know. We didn't call him his full name Ambrose, we called him Amby, you know. And Jeff Galloway, he was at Wesleyan then too, and he was Jeff, you know. And all, it's the most down to earth sport of all, because this is the way the sport is. It's just so tough. I think that puts you into a certain way of thinking, I think. And we're not the big money sport. You know, we've never been the big money sport, and we all know that. And so I think that's a great leveler. It's a leveler under those circumstances where there's a kind of power to our sport that's equal, where we're all kind of equal in a certain way that's very unique.
Didn't some of your running buddies back then call you GOAT before you were the greatest of all time, and GOAT had a different meaning, you were telling me?
That was when I was a poker player. One of my buddies called me that, you know, because he could hammer me in poker. So that was the nickname he gave me, you know. And yeah, in fact, I had a little symbol. I had a motorcycle once, and my motorcycle helmet, I had a symbol of a goat on it, you know, with its horns and everything, that whole deal, you know, Billy Goat, that whole deal.
We were talking with
Love
Jack
to
the
see
last
it,
week about life being full of sliding door moments. And now that you mentioned your motorbike, that was a bit of a sliding door moment in your life, wasn't it? Because you'd come under the influence of ambi. You're mucking around, I guess, in a sense with running, but you weren't serious. Then you got your motorbike stolen, your Norton precious motorbike. You got a push bike, and that got stolen a couple of weeks after that. Suddenly, you had no wheels. So what could you do but run? And that started it.
Yeah, I didn't really like taking the waiting for the subway in the cold Boston weather. I wasn't used to the subway. I'm from Hartford, Connecticut, Newington, right outside of Hartford, a little town, and I just wasn't used to it. So when my motorcycle was stolen, I had nothing left. I had borrowed $1,000 to buy that motorcycle. It's a used 650 Triumph, nice motorcycle. And Jason, or Charlie, my brother, and I, his lifelong friend, loaned me the money. Neither of us were making any money. We were working at a local hospital, in Boston, because we were selective service conscientious objectors to the war in Vietnam and all that. It was a very tricky time, tough time. And so when that got stolen, that was it. I had, that was it. I said, I think I'll get back to running, because I had become a smoker, and all that. And I said, so I joined the Boston Y. The Boston YMCA was right around the corner from our little apartment, I joined the Y and go over there and row a little bit and cut back on my smoking. And that's what you do. And then you start feeling a little better. I ran in their indoor track, and all these old timers were in there way ahead of me. And but it's just fun to move again, start moving again,
Sounds similar to Dave McGilvray, when he ran across the country, and then all of a sudden he came back and he lost his job, and that changed his life. Then he started doing
absolutely.
events.
And I think, Vince, that, when we're younger, I always have sympathy for the young people, just graduating from high school and college, because it's so tough.
Yeah.
It's such a tough time in your life. You don't know what you're going to do. For me, it got determined for me in a way, during the war. And so I was there for about 2 years. You had to do 2 years selective service, a low paying job. And Jason was also a conscientious objector. The war was changing, and in a lot of ways it was becoming a different world, sort of. But we lived right around the corner from the Boston Marathon. Me and Jason, I should explain, was our Newington High School miler. He was a runner too, but he had given up too. And Charlie, my brother, had quit. We all quit.
Right.
So it's not unusual, I would say, to the young to quit running at some point, because it's such a hard sport. Sometimes you get burnt out. You get burnt out and you need a break. And that's the way I view running. But I also view it's the place you can go to. It's a I don't know, how would you describe it? It's kind of a refuge.
Yep. Exactly.
It's a refuge. And that's what I think happened with Dave when he lost his job. It was the same thing, and when Jack Foltz was casting about, had run the Boston Marathon, but he felt, I can do better. I think I can.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's our sport. It's always thinking that way, and that's what runners try to do. And then we help each other get there. Name of the game.
Yeah, I think people are realizing that more and more, especially now, because there's so much going on that's bad in the world, but people are turning to running. There's a lot of new people turning to running, and they're finding the sport, and it is a place to go for solace and to collect your thoughts and have some peace of mind. I know that in New York, where Natalie is, it's horrible right now. Obviously, she's in Manhattan.
Yeah, I haven't even been outside. I'm so grateful I have a treadmill, and my treadmill has all sorts of programs on it. So I've run in Australia and I've run all over the world on my treadmill, but I haven't left my apartment because I'm in I live across from a bunch of hospitals, and people weren't social distancing too well. So
Tough.
So yeah, but
Very
it's
tough,
solid.
running on a treadmill, I always struggle with. I have one leg shorter than the other. I really struggle with it. So I never became accustomed to it, but now it's a great asset. If you can be, you know how to run on a treadmill, then you got it made, I think, Natalie, and it gives you, because every time we run, those endorphins go to our brain, to our body. And Jeff Galloway is an expert explaining the psychological part of running, which is just phenomenal. We didn't know that, Amby and I and Jeff didn't know that back in the 60s when we were at Wesleyan, but now the science of exercise has come so far, then we all can benefit. And that's the great thing. But I think what I would really love to see is more people explore the sport. And so I think Boston Buddies and the RRCA in the United States, and around the world, and cross country for high school kids, no matter where you are in the world, to give it a shot,
Bill, just to take you back to your early days, Tom Derderian, who Vince had on a couple of weeks ago, was executive producer of the Boston Marathon, but Tom's written the definitive book of the Boston Marathon history. And he writes of you in your early days, Bill spent a long time unemployed. He was in turn aimless, happy, confused, angry, and frustrated. He wandered between rebellion and destitution. And we spoke about this the other day. You said you wouldn't be offended if I raised that, but just cast your mind back. What was a young Bill Rodgers like when he's trying to grappling with it before he had his breakthrough year in 75?
I only knew, I was in Boston. I was doing what I had to do, for selective service. But I will tell you one thing, working at the hospital, I worked at the Brigham Hospital, famous hospital, and I was an escort messenger. I took people around in wheelchairs and on stretchers, down the operating room to get blood samples. I did everything, and Jason, he was out in the parking lot, but I learned so much, and I saw, it was really tough because I saw people who were really sick, had emphysema or something, and of course I had my cigarettes up here in my breast pocket, in my jacket, I was a smoker, but I started to think, saw some tough stuff, and I said, no. It took me a while. It took me about a year and a half to wake up. But I think seeing the Boston Marathon, Jason and I went over there. I don't know if we went over on a motorcycle. It was only a mile and a half away. And there I saw my old teammate, Amby Burfoot, and Jeff Galloway finishing the race. I said, I used to run with those guys. They were my teammates, and that really hit me. And then I saw John Vitale from the University of Connecticut. And so if you see someone out there, and I think Tom Derderian really talks about that so much in his book, which I love his book, The History of the Boston Marathon. I think it's the best book ever written about running, or certainly about an event. And Tom put so much work into it. And but I think that feeling of, how do we become a runner? Sometimes it's stop and go, and it can be tough, and how do you keep going? I was very lucky moving to Boston, in the Boston Marathon, but seeing it played such a role, and it took me a while, but finally tried it in 73. I didn't know what I was doing. I joined the BAA, Boston Athletic Association, because Jock Semple saw me at a race in Newton. It was a 30-kilometer race. I actually ran it in my blue jeans. We didn't have very good running gear in those days, going back 100 years, But I used to run in my blue jeans, and my running shoes, and I had some gear, but in that race, I got to tell you a crazy story. First prize, the race was won by Amby. First prize, 4 tires. It was put on by a car company, Silver Lake Dodge. So the winner got Amby didn't have a car, so I went to second place. That guy didn't have a car, so I got third place. So it went to me. I didn't have a car. I don't know who got the tires.
Couldn't give them away.
Literally.
Just crazy. I mean, that's our sport,
It sounds like you had a pretty big comeback though. I'm from Philly. I go back to that Rocky theme. 1974 for you. You had your race in Philly, right? The Philly Marathon?
Absolutely. I love the Philadelphia Marathon. The Philadelphia Marathon, it's a huge race. Unless you've been there, people don't know that, and it's an old race. Clarence DeMar won it back in 1926. It's just incredible, the history of Philadelphia. some of these old races they're kind of making big comebacks now, I think, as our sport is booming and booming and booming. But when I ran it, it was not the current course, Vince, where you run through the city, just like New York City takes everyone through the city, and all races do nowadays. But when I ran Philly, we were stuck out. Well, I wouldn't say stuck. We were running along the Schuylkill River, and I loved running along the river. But it would be laps, and you could see your competition either ahead or behind you, And we finished at the Art Museum. There was no Rocky statue there in 1974.
Right.
But I did win a watch. I won a watch. It was worth about $8. There was no prize money in those days. Of course, our sport was still strictly amateur. But I won a wooden carving of a marathoner, which I still have this day. And every year I go to the Philadelphia Marathon now, Vince, and I meet the runners at the expo, and Meb comes in, Desi Linden comes in there now. And it's just a great, great race. It's just, the whole city is behind it. It's just great fun.
Yeah, they're doing a great job with it and promoting the city. It's one of the few races, marathons, that's actually like owned by a city, not a private company. So they really try to promote the tourism aspect of it and bringing people in. They have the half marathon, they have an 8K, and then the marathon. We actually had Mitch Stoller on the other day, who's the chief philanthropic officer of the American Association for Cancer Research. They're the title sponsor of the Philly Marathon. So that 8K raised a lot of money for cancer research. It's a great event.
They've done a great job.
Last year.
Absolutely. They've done a really good job. And I think having that group gives them a lot of strength.
Yep.
I'll tell you one funny story, though. I was here about 6-7 years ago, and I wanted to run, I think it's the Rothman 8K.
8K, yeah.
That's about what I was set to run, 8 kilometers. And I ran out to the start line in the morning, but it was a really cold morning. It was 27 degrees. And I saw my old training partner and a longtime friend, Tom Fleming, 2-time New York City Marathon champion. And he was at the start line because his young daughter, Margot, was running her first marathon. And I just got there and he said, Bill, get out there. They're about to start. Get out there, And so I don't know, I took off my jacket and I threw it to the ground. I jumped in front and the gun goes off. We start running. Well, after about 8 miles, this was no 8K. I was going the wrong direction. I'm running into the city. I thought we were going to go out on the river. And up ahead, I see a tall, skinny guy. I said, that's Amby Burfoot. That's my old teammate. I run up to Amby. I said, Amby, what race is this? He says, this is a half marathon.
Okay, that's hilarious.
So this is the story of my life.
But still better than your first half marathon where you froze, also with Amby, right? In your sweatshirt and got completely in a blizzard.
That's right. You're right, Natalie. Amby convinced me to run this half marathon. I had no idea what the heck this is going to be like. I had on my grandfather's football leather sweater, weighed about 20 pounds, big heavy red sweater. And I ran the race with that and something underneath it and those gray woolen pants that we had in those days, But Amby was training to win Boston. He was in really great shape. And of course, he did win that year, 1968. And I wish I knew what time I ran that day. You always want to recall your time. But I remember I froze. I just froze. I was like, yow, this is brutal. I didn't run another half marathon until about, probably 73 or something, 72, 73, a long time later. And it's just an odd distance at that time. It was a crazy story. And we all have these races in our background, in our stories. We can all write a running book. We can all write a book,
No wonder you started your Bill Rodgers Running Centre and your Bill Rodgers clothing, Bill. If you were back in the day, you were running in heavy sweatpants and a family member's heavy top because you made stuff which was tailor-made for runners when you produced your own clothing line, didn't you?
Well, Ian, what happened was for years, with the runners, we were all struggling financially. We were all poor, because of the amateur rules and everything. It was very tough to make a living. And this is true in track and field, all the Olympic sports. It was kind of tragic because when you look back at the history of the sport, you see a lot of people who quit early. They couldn't continue their careers. Terrible things, you know. But anyway, Frank Shorter had discovered that Ron Hill, a British runner, where amateurism actually evolved from, you know, had started a running store and a clothing line. So Frank said, and I think this is, of course, after he won his Olympic gold medal. Well, he went to the head of USA Track and Field at that time, a fellow named Olin Castle. And Olin Castle had won the Olympic 400-meter relay gold medal under the Frank's former collegiate coach, Giegengak. I think his name is Rob Giegengak. And so anyway, Frank had a connection with Olin Castle, you know, that way, and said, you know, I want to create some good running gear and everything. And he went forward, and Olin Castle agreed and said, hey, give it a shot, you know, and give it a shot. And he started his clothing line. And actually, around that time, Frank had opened a running store. I opened a running store myself in '77 with my brother Charlie. And so we started being able to make a living, you know, in the sport. And our stores were not only designed to make a living, but also to reach out to other runners. So I named it the Bill Rodgers Running Center because we didn't have the money to pay a, endorsement fee. There were some chains of running stores starting up, you know, like Foot Locker or something. And so actually I went to an event in New York and I bought a Frank Shorter running jacket. So I wore that for a while, but it was too small for me. So I gave it to Johnny Kelly, the old Boston marathoner who did Boston like 61 times, you know. But later I got a letter from one of Frank's employees saying, do you want to start a clothing line? And I said, sure, of course. I didn't know how to go about doing it, you know. I'm not really a business person. Neither was Frank. We were both just people trying to make a living in the sport and try to keep going. Today, everything has changed so much for the better. You know, the people trying to become professionals have a much, I wouldn't say easier competitively, but they have much more support, I think, in many ways. So athletes from around the world have a better shot of supporting themselves as they become older. You know, when you take a look at the athletes of today. So it's a different world and a much better world.
But that transition era, Bill, that you're involved in, that sort of mid to late 70s, that was quite an extraordinary time where, you know, you were trying to professionalize the sport. Yourself and Frank Shorter and others were butting heads with official administrators. I think they called it shamateurism, didn't they? Because it was a sham and you're amateur, but you could actually get a bit of money. But there's all this cloak and dagger stuff, money shoved in shoes. The race promoter would give you a pair of shoes and there'd be your money tucked in the bottom of that. You had to be very secretive about it.
It's true, Ian. It was really it was demeaning. You felt like dirt. And you said to yourself, you know, why here we are, we're running to represent our country. One of the great honors, representing your country. You know, I didn't go to war and represent my country that way, but maybe I can do something here. That's the way I thought, you know, and I said, why we have, and I was all the top runners, like my friend Tom Fleming won New York twice, second place at Boston, you know, everybody felt the same way. And I think they did in other sports. I heard that the Olympic women's rowing team fought hard to change the sport, to be more professional and treat the women equally as men and so forth, you know. So we would go on runs and we would be ranting and raving about what we need to do. And finally, in 1981, the Association of Road Racing Athletes was formed by a group of about 30 top racers. Some of them were from other countries, like Anne Audain and Lorraine Moeller from New Zealand, and Patty Catalano from the United States, first American woman to break 2.5 hours in the marathon. Greg Meyer, Boston Marathon champion, Benji Durden, Olympian for the United States, and John Sinclair from the United States. So it's just, we had a meeting with USA Track and Field in 1981 with Olin Castle, and he kind of wasn't too friendly to us. So we had to move forward on our own. It was a big gamble because in those days, federations controlled the athletes and told them where you could go and when you could go. It was kind of like baseball before there was free agency or something, I think. So we all put ourselves on the line. For example, our federation tried to stop me from going to a marathon in Stockholm, Sweden, which I was supposed to go. I was going to go over there with Dick Beardsley, and we were going to duke it out with the Swedes, you know. And Greg Meyer won the Cascade runoff in 1981 in Eugene, Oregon. They tried to kick him out of the sport, you know, and they did that with Anne Ordain from New Zealand. They took away because they controlled whether or not you can compete in the Olympic Games. That's what they held over us. You know, if you took money, they'd say, "Oh, you're not worthy. You're a pro or something." You're trying to, yeah, that's just a fraud. It was just terrible. You know, I don't believe in the Olympic Games necessarily. You know, I like seeing you represent your country, and if you can win a medal, this is fantastic. I love it. I love the Olympic Games. But in fact, most nations have money for athletes to win medals. This is just the way it is today. And so I just think there is better treatment. And I think USA Track and Field has gradually treated the athletes better and better and better. And some of them do really, really well financially, and they should. They're some of the best athletes on the planet. And that's what we I think partly, Ian, because here in the US, we fought against the stigma of being what folks considered running or track and field as a minor level sport. I never thought we were minor level. I always thought that we were the equal of athletes in any other sport. And perhaps in Australia, you would be Australian rules football or something, or rugby.
Sure, yeah.
Is the biggest sport, you know? So maybe the athletes there, they had to also fight amateurism, you know? And but it changed worldwide. You know, there was a split in the world between somewhat the socialist countries and the Western, more capitalist countries, we could say, you know, and so that was where the split was. And so it was kind of a struggle, but now there's kind of a more equal relationship between athletes from all over the world. And that's the best thing.
Talking about 1980, that was a pivotal year for you, wasn't it, Bill? Because it was the year of the Olympic boycott.
Yes.
And I'd love you to share your thoughts on that, because that was pretty crushing for you with the boycott. But it also led with you not being able to go to Moscow, to you winning another famous Boston victory. So just talk us first about the Olympics, what that meant, because a lot of people thought that was going to be your year. You were in your prime.
Well, I wanted to try for the Olympic team again because I made the Olympic team in 1976, you know, which was the be all and end all. There was no world championships of track and field and marathoning in those days when I was at my best, you know, or when Toshihiko Seiko was at his best, you know. So the Olympics, that's why it was so powerful, and the federations could hold that over the athlete's head, you know. So I ran in 76, but I had a foot injury, so I couldn't run very well. I kind of limped in the race, you know. And so I wanted to go back. But when the boycott was announced in March of 1980, you know, I was already an Olympian, so it made no sense for me to just become I said, I'll run Boston instead, you know. And I was able to run Boston and win Boston, which was great fun, you know, as an honor. And I feel the same way almost about Boston, you know, as I do about the Olympics and everything, because it's so old. It came out of the Olympic Games. It's got that Olympic heritage, those roots, which are so important, you know, the history of our sport. So it was kind of a crushing blow. And I think, Ian, you really touched on it. It's what I was trying to say earlier. The athletes who didn't have a chance to go, people like Craig Virgin of the United States, one of the best 10,000 meter guys in the world, you know, and then they told him, no, you can't go. And it was so political. It was so tough. And I know, you know, running, I don't know, it'd be like if they shut down the Super Bowl in the US. Well, a lot of people would raise a ruckus, but we were vulnerable. We didn't have any power. And so we said, well, you know, we got to stick together. So that's why we formed that association. And with Nike's support at the Cascade runoff, and Don Cardon, U.S. American Olympian who took fourth in Montreal, you know, he was in charge as well. And we succeeded in making the sport professional. And so now the athletes at least have a backup. You know, if something bad ever happened again, you know, you can still make a living. You can go on to another race. Now we have the World Marathon Majors, which is fantastic, Ian. So the whole world is starting to experience what the marathon is about. We're very lucky, I think, Vince, in the Boston area or something. We have this old race. And Natalie, you went to Wesleyan, you know about Boston. You live in New York, you know about New York City Marathon. But this is a global sport. It's bigger than one race. It's bigger than one city. It's global. And I've been to Melbourne, Australia, Ian. And so I have a sense of this. I've actually won a marathon on 5 continents. And only 2 other marathoners from the U.S. have done that, Ron Tabb, Frank Shorter. Well, Frank's actually only got 4. He's only got 4. Gonna have to have Frank on the show.
We did have Ron
because
on
he
the
didn't
show.
run in Australia, Ian.
That World Marathon Majors is a great innovation, isn't it? Because, we all know somebody who's got the coveted 6-star medal. I've got a mate who's age 64 or something like that. He's just a back-of-the-pack runner. He knows that he's nothing special. But for him to have run 6 world marathons across the globe and to have a 6-star medal, like, you're an elite amongst the everyday runners. So it's a great innovation. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, and I think when you start to explore the sport, that's what we all have done. And so now the door is opening another notch. You know what I mean? And I think there will be a marathon. My gut guess is the next major will go to Beijing. And it should, because one of the world's biggest populations. I ran the Beijing International Marathon in 1982 with Ron Tabb, who actually won the race, for the U.S. So I think that the global nature of our sport, we're starting to feel this more and more. And yeah, anyone can try to get into the 6 World Marathon Majors. It's tough, though, because marathoning is becoming kind of an expensive sport, too. It's becoming a little expensive, I think. And that's kind of a tough thing for some of the runners. The good thing is, I think with some of the sponsors, they'll, set aside some numbers and everything. I don't know how that works with Boston Buddies, Vince. Does something like that exist?
As far as like racing, you mean, or the global racing?
Yeah, or just getting into Boston. Do you work with an organization, like a fundraising group or something?
We do raise money. Like I said, Natalie ran for a charity last year called The Second Step, which is actually based in Newton. They are a charity that helps survivors of domestic violence. So we've gotten
Good deal.
We've gotten a bid from them the past 3 years.
Good.
So we partner with them and try and raise as much money as possible for that organization. But we do welcome a lot of the charity runners to our group. We have Charity Wednesdays where they can post a video, post links to their charity fundraisers, and we encourage them to do things, goofy things to try and raise support for the charity that they're involved with.
Absolutely.
And it's been great. It's been a great way to bond the people too. Like
Absolutely.
They rally around the charity runners. We're a group that really appreciates them, because I personally know, because I ran for the Second Step 3 years ago, and raising money is harder than training for the marathon.
I think the thing is, it gives you some strength, because this sport is so tough, and we all know that. Actually, I was one of the first athletes, I think, to do something like this. Because in 1975, after I won Boston, I got letters in the mail from people from the MS Society.
Mm-hmm.
And so Will Cloney, who was the race director then in 1975, in those wild and crazy years, and in 1980 when Rosie Ruiz jumped in and everything. But I got letters from the MS Society, and my grandmother passed away from MS. So we work with them on a low-key basis. This is before the start of the official fundraising groups all got on board, and today I work with a group called Impact Melanoma fighting skin cancer. Mm-hmm. And I think all the athletes do stuff like this. And we've always been people who tried to speak out about things like this. And like you did, Natalie, we're kind of like goodwill spokespersons, or we're trying to be as best, and we all do that. So it's powerful stuff. And I love those new runners, and sometimes I feel sorry for them. I know one young woman who ran Boston last year, and she dropped out, a mile to go. But I know how she feels, because I dropped out 3 times at Boston. This is a tough sport.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the toughest sports in the world, and everyone in the sport is deserving of respect. That's for sure.
Yeah, Natalie, I think that running for a second step, it kind of was a little bit life changing for you as well. Different perspective
Definitely.
on things when you ran it. Can you tell us a little bit about how that
Definitely.
changed
It's like
you?
I ran in 2018 in the monsoon year, but even though that was a big accomplishment, it meant so much more when I ran for the second step. And I'm from Trinidad, and one of the people that was a client of theirs was originally from Trinidad as well. And I got to meet her like out on the court. It was just, so powerful, so impactful. And when I was raising money, I got to get a lot of people in Trinidad involved, and they aren't as aware. Yeah, there are a few people that run marathons there, but they're more into sprinting. It's not a thing. So many people sort of connected and got involved that way. And I realized that I didn't realize how many people I knew that were survivors, that I got, DV survivors. And I got to help so many people that way as well. So many people said, they didn't realize that runners raised money for people like them, or that was out there. So it was very meaningful, very impactful.
Absolutely. I hear what you're saying. By the way, I ran in Trinidad.
What? Where did you run
in Trinidad? Yeah, I ran into your Olympic Stadium.
Whoa.
Yeah,
that's
very,
amazing.
very cool. This is probably back in the, in the 80s and everything. I won a 10K there. Beautiful country, very mountainous, hilly. I've run a lot through the Caribbean.
Nice.
That's one of the cool things about our sport. We get to go everywhere, isn't it?
Exactly. I was going to be running London, representing Trinidad as the age group, for the age group championships, because there are not many of us that run marathons. So in the 2018-19 cycle, I was the #1 ranked Trinidadian with my 4:30 something New York. You know what I mean? Like my New York, I walked through,
that's
and
cool.
I found it. So hopefully when it happens, the age group champions still get to participate for the inaugural. Yeah.
And my congratulations on your race at Boston in 2018. I was watching that race with my girlfriend Karen. We came out, we were watching on TV because we knew it was a brutal day. And we went outside because I had been with Ian the day before and with a runner from Australia. So I knew it was going to be a brutal day, Natalie. And I'm not so good with that kind of cold weather. I hate that brutal weather. So I went out there all bundled up. I was freezing. We were freezing to death. I wanted to see Desi come in because she was on the win. I said, that was about all I could take. I said, how are people going to make it? But my congratulations, both you and Ian made it. It was just one of the hardest days, I think, in Boston Marathon history, for sure. Maybe you ran on the coldest day, Ian and Natalie, and Jack Foles ran and won on maybe these are the two worst days in Boston Marathon history, But I had great fun in Trinidad. I was treated really well there and had great fun, It was an experience to see the country a little bit. It was fun.
Bill, you mentioned the famous Rosie Ruiz before, so let's just get your take on that. Boston 1980, it was a memorable day because you won your 4th Boston.
Yeah.
But here you are on the victory dais, and they present this young woman to you who, isn't dressed like a runner, doesn't look like a runner, hasn't sweated like a marathoner.
Yeah.
And but she's presented as a winner because she crossed the line first. But you knew something was wrong right from early on. Just talk us through all of those extraordinary events in one of the most extraordinary years.
It was bizarre because there's so few incidences of real cheating in the sport. There's some, and at that top level there is some. But I think overall it's rare. And I think even more so back in those days. When there were so few runners, just weren't many runners. So when she came in and sat down next to me, here comes the women's winner, I knew 2 of the potential winners. One was Patty Catalano, who was from Quincy, Massachusetts, lived in the Massachusetts area, and I knew her very well. She was very high level, one of the best in the world. And then there was Jacqueline Garreau from Canada, So I expected one of those two are going to win. You know, the women's fields, this is in the early days still of women's marathon, you know. And in comes a woman who I had no idea who she was. And they sat her down next to me, and they took the mic that was in front of me, and they moved it over abruptly in front of Rosie. And then I listened to the media. And then I knew right away she was the winner, you know. And Fred LeBeau was there, and Kathy Switzer was there, and my brother Charlie was there. And the people who really know running, we know running. You can't finesse us. I mean, we know it. I felt bad for Rosie. I felt bad. Because the media, once the media got their hooks into her, you know, and I felt bad for her. I almost convinced her to give up her medal. You know, but there was one race director there who disliked Fred LeBeau and the New York Roadrunners because they had all their races in Central Park. And this guy was a race director. He wanted to put his race in Central Park. And so he stood up for it and he said, no, keep your medal. Fred was saying, no, she cheated. And I told her, I said, Rosie, you know, listen, if you want to say something, you should say, really, what do you know, it's okay. You know. Everyone makes mistakes. You know, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's just an error. And, you know, you give up your medal, runners will say, that's cool. You had guts. You have guts. That's the way I viewed it, you know. But because then she felt pressure because of her job. You know, she felt pressure. And then she couldn't give it up. And then it was kind of a sad thing, but the media, man, they love that story. And I've always
watching
said
the interviews
the most
with
famous
you,
marathoner in the world is Rosie. You know, is not, sure isn't Frank Shorter, Olympic gold medalist, or Kathy Switzer, or Roberta Gibb, the first woman to run Boston, or Joan Bernard Samuelson. It's none of them. It's Rosie. And it shows you the power of the media.
Yeah. But watching those interviews back recently, you had to employ all of your diplomatic skills just to try and not call her out as a cheat, which is what you were thinking, but just sort of casting a few doubts, and it put you in a difficult position, obviously.
You know, I had won my race. I won the Boston Marathon for the 4th time. You know, I'm number 2 on the all-time list of winners of Boston Marathon. I knew what I had done. So there's people who always try to take it away from you, and that happens all the time. So I knew that and everything, but still, I was free. Rosie was in a trap. She was in a trap, and I knew it, you know. And the media, you know, they can be tough on somebody. And but I knew that Fred knew, and my brother knew, and Will Cloney was a good guy. The Boston Marathon race director at the time, he was a good guy. And he immediately contacted Fred, and they worked together. And they found footage, and an eyewitness in New York, you know, seeing Rosie get on the subway, you know. I just kind of felt bad for her because, you know, people would make fun of her, that sort of thing, you know. But hey, man, if that's the worst thing you ever did in your life, that's nothing. Come on. That's nothing.
True. It's a good perspective on it. Yeah. There's like you said, there's something else was going on there. And I think you and both Jacqueline were very gracious that year to her, because
we kind of felt sorry for her. Jacqueline was really cool. I don't know if I would have been that cool. Jacqueline came down from Canada. She finished the race. She thought she was winning, and then the crowds weren't cheering for her suddenly she finished the line, and it was like second place. Sort of, it was a terrible kind of thing in a certain way, because the public also didn't know as much about the marathon, Vince, as they know today.
Yeah.
That's the great thing today, is that they have learned so much more about the marathon. And I think the sponsorship of the Boston Marathon and of all the marathons, the major marathons, has helped so much, because now they can really work with the media in a better way. So stories like what happened with Rosie and Jacqueline Garreau won't happen, because there are cameras along the course now. So they didn't have the sponsorship then, you know.
Yeah.
But you're right, Vince. Jacqueline came down. She is I heard her compared to Chris Everett, the great American tennis player, that she she was so cool and calm, and when she lost, she didn't like smash a racket or something. Jacqueline came down, and she was open-hearted. She said, "I understand. You know, it was a mistake. It was a mistake." And Will Cloney had a ceremony, you know, and they gave her a gold medal. And Jacqueline is still the same today. I mean, she is classy. She is just classy. And she just had this feeling about her. And it was a great story to kind of make lemonade out of lemons, I guess, you know. So I still see Jacqueline. She comes in for the Boston Marathon, and became a massage therapist, muscular therapist, you know, great champion, still a runner, you know, but it's kind of like the lore of all marathons have these stories.
Yep.
New York City has its stories, you know, and Baltimore and Philadelphia and Melbourne, Australia, and all over the world, you know, all the stories. And that's what I love. I love the stories. And we Natalie, you have your stories, you know, and the domestic violence thing is tough. It's tough. We need to speak out about all these issues that kind of make us weaker as a country, as a population. And when we do that, we get stronger, I think. You know, if you admit these things, you get stronger, you know.
Well, there's plenty more stories to come. That's probably not a bad place to end part one, because we're going to do this as a two-parter, aren't we, Vince?
Yes. Part 2 will be airing on Thursday. This is going to air on Monday, so stay tuned. We've got plenty more to talk to with Bill Rodgers and the crew here. Thank you again for your time. But stay tuned. We'll be back in 3 days.